Hi. Sorry, I don't think you can help, but I'll try. I bought a food court meal voucher pack at Pacific Center, and the registration link keeps rejecting my code.
You're in the right place. I'm Priya at customer service. When you say rejecting, is it showing invalid, already used, or something like a mismatch error?
It says code not recognized. I typed it twice, and I even scanned the QR. The cashier mentioned it's tied to an email, but I'm not seeing any confirmation either.
That usually happens when the system reads an O as a 0 or when the pack wasn't activated at the till. Do you still have the receipt and the cardboard sleeve the vouchers came in?
Yes, I've got both. The code begins with MVO, then there's a character that might be O or 0. Also, I paid with Apple Pay, so I'm not sure what you need.
Apple Pay is fine. I'll check activation from the receipt, then we'll verify the code format from the sleeve. If it wasn't activated, we can do a manual override and reissue a valid registration code.
Okay, great. I was worried it was my fault. Do you need me to log in on my phone while you look it up?
Not yet. First, I'll confirm the transaction and the pack ID. If we can validate those, your login becomes the last step, not the first.
Question number 1. What is Priya's immediate plan to diagnose the issue? Question number 2. What can be inferred about Ethan's main concern? Question number 3. Which image best represents what Priya requests Ethan bring?
Thanks. I'm pulling up the transaction now. The receipt shows the voucher pack, but the activation flag is missing, which would explain the not recognized message.
So it wasn't something I typed wrong? I kept staring at that O or 0 character like it was a logic puzzle.
You were right to question it, but insofar as the system is concerned, an unactivated pack won't validate even with a perfect code. I can submit a reactivation request, but it needs a supervisor approval.
I'm on my lunch break, so time is tight. If approval takes a while, is there a workaround that doesn't leave me stuck?
We can do a temporary digital voucher, whereas the original pack stays pending. You'd receive an email link within an hour, and once the activation is corrected, the physical vouchers become valid too.
I didn't get any email earlier, so I'm slightly worried it'll go to spam or to the wrong address. I used a work email at the till.
Let's confirm the address on the receipt record and add a secondary email as redundancy. Also, if your IT filters links, I can print a QR slip you can scan on site.
That sounds practical. If you print the QR slip, I can eat now and still keep the pack for later, right?
Question number 4. Why does Priya say the code fails even if typed correctly? Question number 5. What does Priya imply about the fastest way for Ethan to eat today? Question number 6. What is Priya's attitude toward Ethan's email concern?
All right, I've added your personal email as a secondary contact and generated the temporary voucher. Here's the printed QR slip. Use it at any participating food court vendor today.
Perfect. What happens to the original pack? Do I need to come back in person, or will it just start working once the activation is fixed?
If the supervisor approves reactivation this afternoon, it should reconcile automatically. If it doesn't, you'll get a case number by email, and we can reissue the pack without you lining up again.
And if my work inbox blocks the case number link, I guess the personal email saves me. I appreciate you planning around that.
Exactly. Keep the receipt and sleeve until you see the confirmation. Had the pack been activated properly at the till, you wouldn't have needed any of this.
Got it. I'll use the QR now, then watch for the case number. If nothing updates by tomorrow, I'll reply to the email thread.
That's the best sequence. Replying keeps the audit trail intact, whereas starting a new request can duplicate the file and slow it down.
Question number 7. What can be concluded about the most efficient follow-up? Question number 8. Why does Priya mention what should have happened at the till?
Hey, Trevor, sorry to bug you over the fence. I'm trying to follow the planting instructions that came with these cedar planters, but the wording is oddly technical. Do you have a minute to sanity check what I'm about to do?
Yeah, for sure. I'm just watering the front pots. What's the hang-up, spacing, soil mix, or the timing stuff that always sounds like it was written by a lab technician?
A bit of all of it. It says to plant the peas as soon as the soil is workable, but also warns about cold snaps. And for the tomato seedlings, it keeps emphasizing hardening off, which I sort of get, but I'm not confident I'm doing it correctly.
Okay, peas are pretty forgiving. Workable usually just means the soil isn't waterlogged and you can rake it without it clumping like wet cement. Cold snaps can slow them down, but they're not as fragile as tomatoes. Tomatoes, though, if you skip hardening off, They sulk even if they don't outright die.
That's what I'm afraid of. I've been putting the seedlings outside for, like, an hour, then bringing them back in. The instructions say increase exposure daily, but it doesn't say what to do if it's windy. Yesterday they looked kind of offended.
Wind is basically plant hazing. If it's gusty, keep them in a sheltered spot, like against your garage wall, and start with dappled shade. The goal is acclimatization, sun intensity, temperature swings, and airflow. If you had a freak cold night, you'd be undoing your progress, so you're right to be cautious.
Okay, that helps. Another thing, it recommends a high drainage medium and then mentions perlite. I bought potting soil, but it feels dense. I don't want the roots sitting in puddles, especially with all this rain we've had.
If it's dense, cut it with perlite or even a bit of composted bark. The point is oxygen around the roots. Nevertheless, don't overcorrect. If it drains too fast, you'll be out here watering every 2 hours in July. Since your planters are raised, they'll already shed water better than the in-ground bed.
Good point. I was also thinking of putting the peas on the north side so the tomatoes get the sunniest spot. But the packet says peas like full sun. That feels contradictory unless I'm reading it too literally.
It's not really a contradiction. Peas tolerate partial shade, whereas tomatoes basically demand heat and light. If you prioritize the tomatoes, you'll likely get better overall results. If you did it the other way around, the peas might still grow, but the tomatoes would be disappointing. So, trellis the peas where they'll get morning sun, and reserve the prime real estate for the tomatoes.
Alright, peas with morning sun, tomatoes in the best spot, and I'll harden the seedlings off more gradually, especially if it's windy. If you're around later, could you take a quick look before I commit? I'd rather adjust now than regret it in a month.
Absolutely. I'll be home after hockey around 7. If you want, we can also check the forecast. If there's even a chance of a cold dip, we'll plan for row cover or just hold off on transplanting by a day. It's way easier to delay than to rescue stressed plants.
Question number 1. What can be concluded about Maya's main concern? Question number 2. Why does Trevor recommend shelter during hardening off? Question number 3. What is Trevor's attitude toward the written instructions? Question number 4. What plan do they implicitly agree on for placement? Question number 5. What is the best reason they might delay transplanting?
Before you start at the counter, remember our priorities: safety, privacy, and consistency. A return is never just a refund, it's also a compliance check.
I get the general idea, but the sequence still feels blurry when customers are impatient. What do I do first when someone drops a bag on the counter?
First, you acknowledge them and confirm what outcome they want: exchange, store credit, or money back. Then you inspect the item's condition while you ask for the proof of purchase.
And if they don't have the receipt, I've heard we can still proceed sometimes. Is that when we jump straight to ID verification?
Not straight away. You check whether the purchase is traceable through the original card or loyalty account, because that's less intrusive. Only if we can't reliably match the transaction do we request government photo ID for a non-receipt return.
So the goal is to reduce friction unless the risk rises, like with frequent returners. If they paid cash and have no receipt, do we still offer a refund?
Usually that becomes store credit at the lowest recent selling price, and the ID is recorded for fraud prevention. A cash refund without a receipt is the exception, and it needs supervisor approval.
What about the timing rules and packaging, especially for electronics? I'm worried I'll promise something that policy doesn't support.
You're right to be cautious. Standard items are 30 days, but electronics are 14 and must include all accessories. If the box is missing, we can still accept it, whereas we document the condition and apply a restocking fee when appropriate.
If they insist the product was defective, does that override the time window? I've seen customers argue that defects mean unlimited returns.
Defect claims change the pathway but not the standards. We test or troubleshoot first, then decide repair, replacement, or manufacturer warranty referral. If we refunded everything on assertion alone, we'd undermine fairness for other customers.
Okay, so I should frame it as process, not suspicion, and keep the explanation neutral. And if someone refuses ID, I offer alternatives like an exchange when eligible.
Question number 1. Overall purpose of Marina's step sequence. Question number 2. Marina's view on requesting customer ID. Question number 3. What can be inferred about fraud prevention priorities? Question number 4. Paraphrase detail about electronics returns. Question number 5. Evan's concern that Marina addresses most directly. Question number 6. Best conclusion about defect claims and refunds.
A Winnipeg teenager is drawing online attention after linking her perfect exam score to an unusual study companion, a 3.5-meter cactus that dominates her bedroom. 17-year-old Maya DeRoche says the plant, inherited from her late grandfather, has been in the family for decades, although it only recently became the focal point of her daily routine. DeRoche told reporters that, during the final weeks of preparation for provincial math assessments, she began treating the cactus as a silent accountability partner, setting timed practice sessions and taking breaks only when she had finished a set of problems. She also kept her phone across the room, explaining that the cactus's sharp spines made her think twice before reaching for distractions. The story has prompted a small wave of interest at local garden centers, where staff report more customers asking about tall, low-maintenance plants for home offices and study spaces. However, horticulturalist Dr. Elaine Coe cautions that cacti do not improve cognition in any direct, measurable way. Rather, she says, the effect is likely tied to habit formation and the symbolism people attach to routines. DeRoche, meanwhile, says she is not selling cuttings and does not want the plant treated as a study hack. Instead, she plans to donate her grandfather's gardening books to her school library, arguing that the real lesson is consistency, not superstition.
You are watching a discussion among three people. They are talking about 69 EDBA 6 F85 76 CF 8311 F3C 91. This is Gaten. This is Florence. This is Mondip.
Okay, for the spring campaign, I'm leaning toward a short, energetic TikTok series plus some paid Instagram. The numbers look promising, but we also need to respect our office policy on brand voice and approvals. If we move quickly, we can still hit the May long weekend push.
I'm not opposed to moving quickly, but quickly is how we end up improvising and then spending a week undoing it. Our policy isn't just a box to tick, it's there because we got burned last year. I'd rather prioritize a controlled rollout than chase trends.
I see both sides. If we're careful, short form could work, whereas a fully polished launch might miss the moment. What worries me is governance, who signs off, how we document approvals, and what we do if comments get heated. If we can map that, speed becomes less risky.
Right, and I'm not suggesting we skip controls. I'm proposing a sandbox batch, 3 videos, pre-approved scripts, and a narrow target in Ontario. If it flops, we learn cheaply. If it lands, we scale. The alternative is waiting for perfection and arriving late.
Florence, I think your concern is less about the platform and more about accountability. Last time, the issue wasn't creativity, it was that edits happened after approval. If we set a hard cutoff, require version tracking, and assign one owner for community responses, we can reduce that ambiguity.
That's fair. I'm not trying to be the no person, I just don't want to repeat the same failure mode. Also, our HR guidance says staff can't appear in branded content without consent forms. If TikTok is the plan, we need to budget for talent or use animation.
Good catch on consent. We can avoid filming employees and use a creator from our vetted vendor list. To keep policy tight, I'll draft a one-page approval workflow, script, legal check, brand review, then scheduling. Insofar as we follow that, I think Florence's risk is addressed.
If you actually commit to that workflow, and don't treat it as a formality, I can support a pilot. However, I want the success criteria written down, not just views, but sentiment and customer service load. Otherwise, we'll declare victory on vanity metrics and ignore downstream costs.
Let's define a scorecard, reach, click-through to the landing page, and a qualitative review of comments. We can also cap responses. If engagement turns volatile, we pause rather than argue with the internet. If we'd had that rule before, the backlash last year might have been contained.
Okay, and I'd like one more safeguard, route any product claim questions to support, not marketing. It's tempting to answer in the moment, but that's where accidental promises happen. With that in place, I can live with a faster timeline than I initially wanted.
Deal. So, vendor creator, animated fallback, one-page workflow, and a scorecard with a pause rule. I'll still aim for the May long weekend, but will only publish once the approvals and the routing plan are signed off. That gives us urgency without recklessness.
I'll take ownership of the policy alignment piece and draft the escalation and documentation template. Florence, you can set the success criteria and thresholds, and Gaten can coordinate the vendor. If we do this properly, we get the agility Gaten wants and the safeguards Florence needs.
Good evening. You're listening to Regional Focus, and tonight we're examining a proposal that several municipal councils in British Columbia have floated, restricting advertising of so-called junk food to children on public property, think transit shelters, recreation centers, and city-run digital screens. The debate sounds simple, but the reasoning behind it is anything but. One viewpoint, often voiced by public health practitioners and school administrators, is that advertising is not merely information, it is behavioral engineering. They argue that children, particularly under 12, lack the cognitive maturity to separate persuasion from fact, whereas marketing campaigns are designed precisely to bypass reflection. From this perspective, restricting ads in spaces paid for or managed by the public is a modest intervention, comparable to smoke-free parks. It doesn't ban the product, but it reduces a cue that nudges routine consumption. Supporters also point out that municipalities already curate what appears on civic property, rejecting explicit content, for instance, so drawing a line around high-sugar, ultra-processed foods is simply an extension of existing standards. A second viewpoint, more common among business associations and some civil liberties advocates, is that the policy risks becoming an elastic rule with unclear boundaries. They ask, who defines junk, and on what nutritional threshold? A granola bar can look wholesome on the front label and still be sugar-dense. A yogurt can be marketed as protein-rich while being essentially dessert. If the definition shifts with political pressure or changing dietary science, companies may face compliance costs and inconsistent enforcement across neighboring communities. Moreover, critics contend that the policy subtly relocates responsibility away from parents and toward government, even though household habits and affordability, rather than billboards, often drive what ends up in a lunch bag. A third, more pragmatic viewpoint comes from municipal staff who are neither cheering nor condemning the idea. They worry about revenue. Advertising contracts help fund transit amenities and recreation programming. If the city narrows eligible advertisers, it may either accept less money or increase user fees. Nevertheless, these staff members also acknowledge a reputational upside. A council that acts on child health may gain public trust, especially if the policy is paired with clear criteria and periodic review. My own conclusion is cautious. The proposal is defensible if it is narrowly drafted, transparently defined, and evaluated for unintended consequences, because symbolism alone, without measurable outcomes, would be an expensive form of virtue.